Hi, everybody, and welcome to TIFF 2025. We are here with our first piece of coverage, which will be the press conference, where we are awaiting Colin Hanks and Ryan Reynolds. We're going to learn a little bit about the film I Like Me, John Candy. It will be available on Amazon Prime on October 10th, and we're going to find out a little bit more about the film from the talent that are here to talk about it. So stay tuned for great interviews on Breezeway Productions.
So, without further ado, I think we should first welcome the director and producer of the film, Colin Hanks. Come on up, Colin. Good to see you, bud.
Good to see you.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Producer of the film, Ryan Reynolds. Co-executive producers and representing the Candy family, Jennifer Candy Sullivan.
Yes.
Hey, Jennifer. And also, Chris Candy, co-executive producer as well. There's a lot of ways we can take this conversation. I'm excited to be here with you. Let's just start with this. Why this film? Why now? And how did you get to be part of this?
Ryan called me up and basically sort of said, I don't want to live in a world where there is not a documentary about John Candy. And I said, I think I agree. I don't want to live in that world either. And then he said, I think you should direct it. And I said, wait a minute, stop. And we ended up just having a lovely sort of conversation about if we were to do that, like what would that actually be? You know, because I just feel that, you know, insert famous historical person and anyone will say like, oh, you should make a documentary about that. And it's not necessarily a wrong instinct, but what does that film actually look like? What is the story that you're actually telling? So we had a very lovely conversation that day.
And I do want to live in this world now.
Yeah. And basically I said like, well, if you're comfortable, like give me some time and let me sort of noodle it a little bit. And at that point I reached out to Chris and to Jen, whom you know, we've known each other for a while. And I said, Ryan Reynolds, is this legit? Do you approve? And they said, yeah, totally. Please do it. And so that was sort of the initial.
We prefer Errol Morris. That speaks to you and Ryan. We kind of knew each other a little bit. Just
The social media world.
Yeah.
Talking with Chris and.
Yeah, we met early enough, and you'd done that really beautiful video that you put out on your Twitter account at the time, and it was went viral primarily. It was the first time there was some major activity about our dad online, and yeah, I think that was
instructive though.
Yes,
but you saw how people really grabbed on.
They grabbed on.
Yeah.
It was a great little snippet of what a documentary, full-length documentary could be.
And so yeah, I think that kind of started percolating, and that's when the sled started going down the hill.
Yep.
Well, I mean, aside from wanting to live in a world that has this kind of film, what made you think that you were going to be the guy that could help pull this together, Ryan?
Well, I've always been obsessed with John, and I've always loved him so much. And the reasons why are a little bit like when filmmakers, you know, sit at sort of these awards functions, and the theme of their movie seems to change from function to function. But the theme of why I love John changes and morphs, but I realize it's actually just kind of evolving a little bit. And John really kind of, to me, represents togetherness, joy, not punching down. John was a good person when no one was watching. And I think that that's a beautiful thing when we live in a very curated world right now. I mean, I would argue way too curated. You know, John was around and moving through the world before any of that, and he just left in his wake this kind of a kindness and a joy. And I think having more, for me, it's nostalgia too. I think nostalgia is the greatest drug on earth. And you know, John had a way about him that really brought people together, and still does to this day. I look at, you know, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and that performance of Del Griffith. I believe that would be nominated for an Academy Award if that were to come out in this moment.
Without giving too much away, because you'll hopefully see the film if you haven't already with the premiere tonight, you start essentially with Bill Murray talking about there's nothing really bad to say about him, and then you end with this beautiful moment from Catherine O'Hara saying he would stay at the bar, nobody would leave the bar, because who would leave a bar that had John Candy in it? Party Monster maybe, but maybe he knew he just needed the business. And it's a really powerful line, I think, in this film. And you get a sense that there's a lot more to John than maybe we got to know, because we saw the funny guy. We saw the funny guy. For the two of you, what an interesting human experience this must be.
Yeah, because he was human and he was our dad, and it's amazing to see, and to see it through the eyes of other people who, you know, admire him and love him just as much as we do.
Why now, Chris? Why is this the time?
I think for our family, we were at a place where we were ready to share more, and I think we had a better understanding of what he was going through. There was all types of psychological stuff that we kind of had to understand about him, and that if we were going to ever entrust anybody to tell that story, we wanted to make sure we had an understanding of what was going on, and it was just the perfect timing for it. Yes, it's a little late, but we thought the E! True Hollywood Story would be enough.
But also, is there an element of this that you're holding on to a story, and releasing a film like this now it's a significant moment in a family's moment in history?
Yeah, it very much feels like a swan song and a very beautiful goodbye to our dad. And this is, you know, the one last great John Candy film that he gets to star in. So we're really happy about that.
Did you meet John on Splash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have very, very vivid memories of meeting John. In fact, one of the first times I remember being on a film set was on Splash. It was John, my dad, and Eugene with the arm in the cast and the neck brace. And so I have very vivid memories of John. And in fact, you know, I have a handful of them because he was around for, you know, a few years there between Splash and Volunteers. And I remember, you know, exchanges that I had with him. And I don't remember a lot of, you know, exchanges that I had. Macaulay Culkin sort of speaks to it in the film, but, you know, he had this way of, even if you were a young kid, he made you feel important. He made you feel special. And John made everyone feel that way, you know, whether it was a director or a co-star or just, you know, someone on the street. And so just that even little personal connection I had was sort of unique enough that I remember going, oh yeah, that's right, I had that same experience.
There's a really powerful moment where Macaulay Culkin talks about how his father had turned into a bit of a monster, and John was one of the first ones to recognize it.
I was on a Zoom with Macaulay before he'd done the interview, and we were just, you know, just kind of, it was an informal pre-interview, but it wasn't even a pre-interview. We were just talking, and he said, you know, there's moments in the movie, you know, where, you know, he'd come to set, and John would say, how you doing? And Macaulay would say, I'm fine, I'm good. And John would stop him and really say, no, this is a lot. How you doing? You know, how are you? How are you handling this? You know, and he just felt so seen by John in those moments, and you could really see John, the dad, John, the thing that, you know, you both experienced, you had the benefit of, and then also that was taken from you at a very young age, which sort of, to me, compounds the tragedy of the loss.
There was a blend within our dad, I think, where we very much felt how important he was in the entertainment world and how big his celebrity was, but there was always this crossfade of him as a father, so even it was a bit confused by the fact that we'd be on set with him, and then we'd also go back to our family farm, or we would be, you know, going to baseball games or whatnot. And so that kind of felt like our experience, I don't know.
Yeah, it's exactly how our experience was. And there were moments where, you know, he'd be signing autographs. I remember as a kid, you know, I'd be like, oh, like try and get in there and pretend like I was a kid. Being like, hey, can I have your autograph? And he'd like, okay, keep signing away. And then he'd all of a sudden look at me and go, eh. And so we'd always like have fun with those moments, because it was like, you know, it's still our family time. And so even though he was doing work, he still made it feel like it was fun and it was family, and you know, there were times where we're like, oh, can we please leave? And he's like, no, this is what we do, and this is how, you know, we're taking the time, and this is part of my work as well. But it was also distilling like good morals and like work ethic for us.
You completely skipped the selfie.
Yep, I know.
How's that working out for you, Ryan?
We'd still be there today if we were doing selfie.
There's also, even if you took the context of the time into consideration, you also get the sense that maybe because your father was like that, he was brutalized by the media.
Oh yeah.
And the other thing is that when they asked him these really bizarre questions, you could tell he was listening,
Sure.
and he was internalizing what he was experiencing. And we're getting the benefit. You used some amazing clips and the pauses in there, where your father had to fight a lot more than I think people understand.
Yeah, that was, I think, some of the more jarring stuff to see when we saw the film, and how uncomfortable he was, and how he was fighting to be polite in all of those moments. And it was a real grapple for him, and I could just see that. And so, flash forwarding to nowadays, where those questions don't usually get asked as quickly or immediately, I was definitely thinking about that time that he was around, and it really was the tail end of a certain era of media.
Yeah, when anything was kind of on the table and a question, and you didn't have pre-interviews, or this was, you're gonna go in and you're kind of going in blindly, and when they ask you questions, there's sometimes you're like, whoa, that's, you know, not at all what I'm here to talk about, or, you know, you'll see in the documentary, it's like, does that bother you? Because it's like, oh, no, it's like, okay, good, then why are we bringing it up?
There's a couple that were so harsh, they're not in there, but I had a conversation with one of the journalists, just I don't know why I did, I just really wanted to reach out and talk about it. And
You reached out to one of the journalists
who had said something, said something, I had just crossed the line so far that I just wanted to understand it. And it wasn't me chastising the person at all. I was genuinely saying, it's not in, but I wonder if you want to talk about it, because you're not the same as you were 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and none of us are, and maybe there's something there. I don't know, a documentary is listening more than it is telling, right? So, the thing that you think is untouchable, or something that is just you want to stay as far away from as possible, sometimes it's the very thing that you want to go toward. And while that didn't end with an on-camera interview or anything like that, to me it was insightful and interesting, and to hear somebody sort of go, wow, I'm appalled.
I mean, there were two things that I found that were really fascinating, because we are dealing with this story that took place now decades ago, is what was said and unsaid. At that time, talking about therapy or mental health was just something that you did not do, and that I thought was an incredibly interesting topic, considering that nowadays it is such part of the social conversation. It's very common to hear, oh, I'm taking a mental health day or anything like that. So it interested me that was not something that was discussed, and yet it was totally okay to be able to mention someone's weight to their face and make them feel incredibly uncomfortable while they're trying to give you an interview. And I thought that...
And they were incredibly gracious in their response.
Yeah, exactly.
Backhanded compliments, where you're like,
And that, to me, I thought was such an interesting dichotomy to just show how much things have changed since John was around. And to when you think of John, you think of this great, gregarious, outgoing, entertaining man. But then when you saw him interviewed, he was uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable, and made even more so by the insensity of not only the questions but how they were asked.
But it's also the persona that is the shield. The persona is the maladaptive coping mechanism that keeps you safe. And I certainly have my own. I think everybody in this room probably has a version of their own. But I think the documentaries I love the most are ones where you really learn something about yourself while you're watching it. And I think. I grew up in Canada. I consider Canada kind of a third parent almost, and really taught me how to kind of live and survive in Los Angeles when I first moved there. has done nothing to help me in New York now, but really did equip me with some of that self-effacing humor that really allowed me to sort of arm myself. But there's something fascinating about that intersection between somebody who has a predilection for people-pleasing and is also struggling with mental health, because a people-pleaser does not ever want to burden another person with themselves, right? So you're always pulling that back. But mental health doesn't move forward inexorably or in any way whatsoever without speaking about it, without actually opening up and saying, hey, I'm not okay. And so that's a tricky thing for the people pleaser, because more often than not, you're gonna get, I'm fine, I'm good, I can keep going, let's do this, I'm fine. You know, that's dangerous.
I have a very clear memory of John being interviewed and mentioning, when your car's not working, you take it into the garage. If your brain's not working, take it into the garage. And I had never heard anybody say that before. Certainly not a famous person.
Right.
Right.
No, I think it was new or back then or not talked about as much. And I think our dad later in life was just understanding, you know, himself and knowing that it was okay to ask for help, be it, you know, any way, like friends, family, you know, professional help. And it's a great analogy. It's like you need help.
You need help. There's some questions that were submitted earlier. John Carucci, APTV. For Ryan, what does it mean to be a producer on this film? As somebody who grew up watching John's work and now having to be a chance to be a part of the legacy.
Well, where are you? Are you in there anywhere? Oh, hey. Hi, how are you? Hi, what's up? It's hugely meaningful. The movie was made, literally made with love. You know, nobody makes a documentary thinking, oh, this is going to open to $600 billion at the box office, you know, and I know Amazon does not like money. So
October 10th.
Yeah. But you know, this is a subject that has at times haunted me, and he's a person and a persona. I find the thing most fascinating with him is that division between who he was as a person and the persona that protected him. And I see that in myself, I see that in how I work. You will meet me on the street and you will say, that man does not have a joyful bone in his body right now. And that is just because I am completely vulnerable and I'm not using any of those coping mechanisms to keep me alive. You know, when I'm standing backstage at Dave Letterman back in the day, which was the most fun talk show to do because it was dangerous. You never know what's gonna happen. And you know, and I would stand backstage thinking like, come on. Where are you? Where's the guy? And the curtains would open and he'd be there. He'd be there. You'd always be there. You know, and John, I feel like had that. I don't know that. I feel that though. That's how I saw him. And I think he's beautiful. I think John was really quite beautiful. And there were so many people back then. I was saying to Colin earlier that I was sitting at a table 20-something years ago here in Toronto with Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, and Chris Farley. We were at a Four Top, and we were having lunch. And all those guys are gone. And all those guys had their own kind of versions of coping mechanisms, and you know, some dangerous, some not. And it's amazing how we canonize the comedian or the guy that, you know, made us laugh for so many years posthumously, not so much in the moment, much more posthumously. And that thing Chris mentioned that we released, I don't know, 8-9 years ago online, really showed me, like, that was so instructive, because I was like, wow, people really grab on and care about this man deeply still. And there's a whole generation of people that haven't seen him yet, and I'm excited for them to check him out.
Zoomer Brian Johnson asked, why did it take so long to make this film? And the motivation, is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've made one version of it. I've never seen it. I know when I spoke with Bill Murray, whose opening line was not hello, it was, you know, hey Ryan, who was the godfather of the spit take? I was like, I see I'm being tested, Bill. To which we went back and forth and agreed that it was both Danny Thomas and Desi Arnaz. It took a long time because most documentaries, you're looking for this flip side. And this documentary does have a flip side. It's just not evil. You know, it's actually a flip side about a person that, you know, struggled with things that everyone struggles with. And, you know, filtered that through the prism of joy. And I think that that's why there hasn't been a proper documentary. That's why I wanted Bill so badly, because it was like, you can't do a documentary on John Candy. He's unimpeachable. I lived with him. I know. You know, he's never done anything wrong, except one thing. It's like, stop talking! It's like, can you please do the interview? Do whatever that was. Tell us I don't want to know what that was. Just tell us later.
Well, Brian did also want to know about how you deal with the dark side of people, especially when you have admiration for them. But it turns out that wasn't such a big challenge for you on this one, because there wasn't that dark side in that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the bad pitch for the documentary would be, you know, when you think of an overweight actor who died too young, you think of guys that unfortunately passed away from a drug overdose. And John didn't. John passed away because he had a bad heart. And there's a difference there. And so that launching point then went, okay, well, if there's not some nefarious reason that he passed away, what else is there? And it turned out that John's relatability, his everyman qualities, were so detailed and so genuine that he suffered from things that everyone suffers from. And that is actually worth examining and looking at. And that to me seemed like such an engaging story and something that I had not seen before.
Imagine there's a lot in that engaging story. Daniel Solzman, Solzy at the movies. How long was the rough cut, the assembly cut of this? And what were the biggest challenges in cutting it down?
It was a lot. I mean, it was definitely a lot. The process is, the film will always reveal itself over time. And so with docs, it's like making a house where all of your elements are already on fire. And so what you need to do is you need to just sort of like throw everything together just to make sure that you have an A to Z story. You see what I did there? A to Z?
Amazon, yep. Jeff Bezos.
Yep. I'm gonna get
just got his wings.
5% off of my Prime membership because of that.
Yeah.
But by assembling the story that way and said, okay, that's the road, great. Now let's break this thing up entirely and let's really sort of start brand new and find what is the most engaging way to tell that story. And because oftentimes that's not just from A to Z, you know, from point A to point Z. It was a lot. There was a lot, and the editing process definitely took a lot of time, and there was a lot of, you know, there were sometimes there were some roads that didn't lead anywhere, and then we needed to come back around. But that is the process. That is what it is. And I've found that the most successful way to go about that is to assemble as many people as you can that all have great taste that can bring something to the table. And I had this great added bonus in that you know, my producer here also is incredibly nuanced in screenwriting, editing, telling story, knowing what something needs, knowing what is lacking. And so,
and shameless, I'll call anyone.
And he will call anyone saying, hey, we need this, we need that. So it was a long process, but I never really looked at the clock. I didn't worry about the clock. It was really more about, hey, is this feeling right?
Right. Did anybody say no?
No. Nobody said no, but there was, I mean, look, Bill Murray's not easy.
Yeah.
Hard to get.
He never said no, but he definitely didn't say yes.
Yeah, no, he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. My kid got him, I think, in the end. I sent him a desperate plea. You know it's desperate when you switch to video for a message. I'm like, Bill, I'm running out of time. You know, of course, existentially, because death will find me someday, but I'm also running out of time on this doc. And I was lying. I wasn't running out of time. I'd run out of time 2 weeks ago. Like, it was over. And my kid woke up, my 2-year-old son woke up at like 11:30 at night to show me his Jingle Bells shirt. And then I said, I'm in the middle of it. I'm trying to send a video to Bill. Tell Bill to do the interview. And he went, do the interview, Bill. Like all angry, like. And I said, well, you say no to a child like that, and I don't know what kind of monster you are. And the next thing I know, he was doing it, and I promised that the child would not attend, and he would be neutralized.
Ivan Reitman once told me that when they set up to shoot Stripes on day 1 of the shoot, they still didn't know if Bill was going to do the movie. They didn't know if he was going to show up that day.
That was even pre-fax. Because there was a while where you just faxed him and to get him to do a movie. This was carrier pigeons, or I don't know,
different era.
Sort of a Paul Revere kind of thing.
You and I grew up in Canada, Ryan, so we know that the wall of influence, the waves of influence from other countries, for a while it was the UK and of course the United States. SCTV had this enormous impact on us because it was Canadian. If you think it is so, why do you think it is important for us to tell the stories of who we are as Canadians, the Canadian stories?
Well, because I think Canadian stories are distinct in so many ways, and they're not distinct because they're not American. That's the thing that people sort of fall, New Zealand, sure. I mean, but we're not Australian, I get it. But Canada is got its own kind of culture, its own kind of vibe. I can meet a Canadian, even if they're hiding their accent, and I know you're from somewhere, probably Regina, maybe Moose Jaw, but definitely Saskatchewan. There's something there that is a camaraderie, an ability to kind of laugh at oneself. To me, it was something I utilized everywhere, every chance I got. You still see it in guys all the way up. Dan Aykroyd, very proud Canadian. John was an incredibly proud Canadian, as am I. And I remember when I went to see Dan Aykroyd, who was another, not a no, but very hard to find. I mean, a couple months. Yeah. And I finally get a hold of him. And he goes, I'll tell you what, kid. You're gonna fly up here, you're gonna have dinner with me, you're gonna spend the night, next morning, we'll do the interview and you get the fuck out. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. And
Sounds like a horror short right there.
It does, and it was one of the best nights of my life. I was at his home. He picked us up at the airport in his 1994 Lincoln Town car. I think he stole it from Grosse Pointe Blank, one of my favorite movies, and drove us to his place out in the woods out there in Ontario. And next thing I know, I'm driving around in his 1920 Pierce automobile. Which was amazing in and of itself, but just his entire home is just like a museum. Just incredible, and it's so gracious. Just wanted to make sure everyone was very, again, Canadian, right? Just everyone comfortable. Had to check the shower in every room. We were a film crew of 4 at that point. Colin was shooting, so I got to do 3 or 4 of the interviews where he did the other 97. But I did get Dan and I did get Bill, and those were thrills for me. Yeah.
Brandon Benitez, journalist, asks, how did you aim to capture the spirit of Canada while telling John's story of his life and work?
John is the spirit of Canada. You don't have to look for that. I mean, I think it's a mistake to try to, it's a rookie error. Even in a scripted film, you listen to the movie and the movie will speak to you. Sometimes it'll yell, especially if you're prepared. If you're prepared, you'll really hear it. And John's in all over it. I think you'd be better qualified to answer that question. I think John is the spirit of Canada.
I mean, look, I'm the lone American here, but I can sing "O Canada," both versions, and I can name all of the Canadian football teams, including both Rough Riders. So I
With the space and without the space.
Correct.
Honorary.
Correct. So I feel honorary in that way. For me, here's the thing. For me, it was a non-issue. John is John. John is Canadian. Canada is John. It's all part and parcel. It's all the same. And so the only thing that we needed to do was just showcase who John was. And everything would come from that, everything that would follow. And so if by any miracle someone sees this and says, well, this is the spirit of Canada, this is it, that's all because of John.
these are the fights we had. I was like, more Robert Goulet. Okay, any Robert Goulet.
Right. You lost that fight.
I lost that
You lost
fight
fight.
10 times out of 10.
I'm curious, actually, all of your thoughts on this. And I know, Chris, you do improv as well. This is from Carmelia Ray, Breezeway Productions. What can an artist learn about how to be better at their craft from the work that John contributed and that you can see in this doc?
Well, I think it's in his intro to Second City, that story is actually really compelling because a lot of people would think of comedy and improv as where you're just talking a lot, but he listened in his very first audition. And that's what caught the eye of Joe Flaherty and the people at the time of Second City. And so it was his ability to listen and then adapt from there. So our dear friend Tino Insana also said improv just appears. And I think when you're in those moments of performance, if you're just kind of in the moment listening, then you just see what you do.
And our dad's attention to detail and reality, and like when he would be on a stage where there is not a single prop, you could feel like you're in a room and know where exactly everything is, because he knew where everything was. Like he knew all the names of the books that were on his bookshelf and all the cups and the glasses and where pillows were, and like he had it in his brain, like it was his world, and you felt that. So it was his reality. It was
Well, but he would do the thing where he would take the book. If he was improvising with somebody, he would take a book and he'd say, take it off the shelf and say, read this to me. And then the improviser would have to read it and he'd go, oh no, it's in Spanish.
I always feel like those certain people, gifted performers, have like LiDAR'd a room or something, and they can kind of just be there in the moment. And I often say to just pile on that question that young actors who come up and say, you know, how do I get into the business? What's the best thing? Is it drama school? Drama school's great. I would say improv though. Yeah. Improv, I mean, my God, because of listening, right? It forces you to constantly listen and then react, not react with some sort of preconceived idea. So it's a beautiful way to learn how to perform. And I think those moments where he says, I like me, my wife likes me, you know, those are moments that just come out of nowhere because he's been listening to the moment. And I think it's beautiful.
It's a crushing moment in the film when Steve Martin recounts that story and talks about he felt like he really hurt John.
Right.
In planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah. Also, speaking of the LiDAR, I once watched his dad eat a cheeseburger that wasn't there. Unwrapped it. Have you ever seen him do that? No. Like, unwrapped it, like and every piece of it got some slopped down a little bit, you know, the pinky caught a little, you know. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Literally, it was just like he's just miming. Like, this is miming. People make fun of mimes. This isn't, this man, now I have nothing but respect. I want to go through the Marcel Marceau catalog.
It's a craft.
It really is a craft. No, genuine.
For the two of you and your mom to relive some of this, can you walk us through what that might have been? Because you can lose yourself in the momentum of a project.
Sure.
It's still your dad and you're seeing these things.
I think that's also a testament to our parents and our mom and our dad being so grounded. So, I know for me, wasn't getting lost in the project at all. Like, it was discovering more about myself, and I think Chris discovering.
I had a shed in the back of the house that I'd locked myself in. There are photos. No,
That's how
I remember when we had a box of 8mm footage that had always just been there, and we got the opportunity to digitize it before we sent it off to get properly digitized. And when my mom and I were looking at that, I believe it was like Christmas footage '89, and when you see like a young version of yourself come on screen, and your dad is alive again, and your mom is younger, and your sister's there with you, it transports you in a way, and I just broke down into tears. It was, I knew at that moment this was going to be a really big undertaking, but you guys were super duper helpful the whole way through. Yes. And I never felt like I was lost in any of it. It felt tethered to reality the whole way through. So.
But it's also, I think that there's a temptation to paint the sad clown scenario. It's very lazy and easy to do that, I think.
Right.
It's an incredibly nuanced person, and as are most people, you know, it's easy to sort of paint with one brush, but he was,
And I think that was always the objective for us as a family, to want to do a documentary on our dad. If we were going to do this, we wanted to make sure that we were working with people who understood nuance.
Strombo, may I ask a question?
Please.
Quick one?
Yeah.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Tammy Reynolds in the back. No, sorry, that is my mom. For you two, they are really?
Mom section.
They should fight to the death. It's only right. I wonder what was it like for you guys sharing him? What is that like, and how do you feel about that now? Asking for a friend.
I think as you get older, you understand more that it's okay to share. As a kid, it's hard. Like I said, I would be in the crowd asking for an autograph from my dad, pretending like I was a part of it, just to get attention. But it wasn't really like he was ignoring me. It was just me being silly, but then also being like, okay, come on, let's move this along. So I think for me, when I was younger, didn't quite understand it, but knew that it was okay. I was fine with sharing my dad with, all of these amazing fans and friends and extended family, because I think our core family was so strong and so tight-knit, it was okay. It wasn't like I was missing something. So there wasn't, I didn't feel like I had a gap, like there was something missing. And then as I got older, I loved it because it also helped me, fill that void of him being gone, talking to so many people and hearing all of their stories was great for me, because there's so many people. I had to, at one point, I felt so bad. I was in Bloomingdale's, I was buying socks. There was a woman who saw my last name on the credit card, and she goes, "Oh, I love John Candy. When's his next film coming out?" Meanwhile, he had already been passed 10 years. And I was like, and I felt so bad that I had to tell her that he passed away. But it was she.
Is there another film?
There is right now. It's
coming out
in a couple hours.
Yeah,
so
I really like that.
she would be happy to know that. But there's moments where I felt guilty that I was like, oh no, I have to tell them. And it didn't make me sad. It was just like, okay, I have to break the bad news to you. But then we had great conversations and we talk, and it was just, therapeutic.
There is something to be said, though, and I'm going to chime in here because it is important to me. Both me and my producing partner, Sean Stewart, we're firm believers in our jobs as documentarians is not to ruin anyone's life. We want them to be not only proud of what the finished product will be, but we want the experience to be a positive one for them. That's the most important thing for us. And so, before we even started this, that's why I wanted to make sure that I had that conversation with Chris and Jen, saying look, if we're gonna do this, I will take care of you, I will do that, but we need to agree that sometimes this is gonna be awkward, sometimes this is gonna be uncomfortable, but we need to be able to speak up and say that and have that agreement that we're all gonna jump off this cliff together. And I got you.
And you zeroed in on that quick. There's a temptation to make this movie an inexorable march to someone's passing, and you started with it. Yeah. Because this movie's about his life, not his death. It's his life, and I thought that was really beautiful and stuck the landing in every way.
Last word to Chris.
Well, yeah, just to that point too, I always thought it was really compelling, Colin, when we would be talking about it, and I would be maybe a bit more focused on the loss of my father and all of the kind of harder things, the heavy lifting of the movie. And I remember you one day said, well, the whole movie's not going to be about that. It's a celebration, and that is the truth when you're talking about a person's life, the scope, and the depth.
And just like our dad's movies, he wanted to make movies that, made people feel good. So I think he would only want his documentary to speak the truth, but also at the end, feel good. You don't want to come out of it going, well, I'm so depressed. You're sad, but it's happy tears. It's good. It's like you're going to feel all the emotions, but you're at the end of the day going, man, I loved him.
Yeah, and you certainly get that sense. Absolutely. John Candy, I Like Me tonight, the premiere at TIFF at Roy Thompson Hall, October 10th. When you
Can I give
Prime
one
Video?
tiny shout out?
It is your film?
To Cynthia Erivo,
Yes.
who covers
Yes.
Paul Young's Every Time You Go in the film, and it was such an unexpected thing. She was over at my apartment, and we were just talking about this, and I said, "Oh, that's a great song from Planes, Trains that was used in Planes, Trains. Paul Young sings it every time." And she goes, "Oh, yeah." And she gets home, and I get a voice note back. She goes, I'm thinking about, is it this one? I really like this one. And she just like sings up like a whole section of the song, just, 1 minute long, just, and then finishes with, is that the one? And you're just like, oh my God. And I got on the phone and I was like, is there any way, Miserivo? She's like, what, Miserivo? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's a song, and she's like, yes. And she just, 2 weeks later, the most beautiful, she and Will Wells, producer Will Wells, had this version of of Paul Young's Every Time You Go that is just the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing I think I've ever heard in my life. I think I listen to it every single day. And it's right up there with a weird cut I have of a Tragically Hip song, or Downey, singing Courage.
Really are great.
I know. The 2 songs every day right now.
Kristen, Jen, Ryan, and Colin, and Rosemary, thank you all so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Kennedy,